You said something and she ran.
Yeah,
she ran.
I told her who you were.
She didn't walk, she ran.
I told her who you were.
Oh, yeah, right.
Ed, what is it about the 63 Corvette that makes it such an icon?
The car is so amazing, and you know, it's all inspired. Bill Mitchell was inspired by what they were doing in Italy with the streamliners, a very simple fuselage with strong fender shapes, and the design team, you know, they just knocked it out of the park. All these subtle shapes.
I mean, these fender bulges, I mean, they're very disco volante, aren't they? I mean, was that his inspiration?
Well, that was the inspiration, cars like that. But then they took it to a whole nother level with the creases, the fillets. I think of those Larry Shinoda sketches where they showed all the section lines, really thinking through every section through the car, through the middle of the car, and you know, and I thought they were inspired by that underwater fish, the stingray, but the car came first and then they saw the link between it. You look at a stingray, that fish, and
right.
The shapes are very much like these shapes, and you know, it's
the harmony of this design, I think, represents kind of General Motors at its peak. You got to work under Bill Mitchell.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Well, it was great.
On a professional level.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he had so much enthusiasm for what we were doing. If he liked what you were doing, you knew it. He may even dance a jig right there in the studio. I was working on a Riviera for him, and he came and he was so excited, and you know, unfortunately, if he really liked the design, he was in the studio all the time to see it, but there's nothing more exciting than when the boss likes what you're doing. And of course, if he didn't like what you're doing, you knew that as well.
Was it always a competitive environment in the design studio as other designers were trying to come up with something that the boss liked?
It was always competitive within the studio or one studio against another, but there was so much secrecy. You know, I was in the Buick studio at the time working on Rivieras. The guys down the hall working on Corvettes, I was never allowed to go into their studio and they couldn't come into ours. There was no movement around the building. Anytime I saw those designers was at lunch in the cafeteria.
Then what about the collaborative process of getting inspiration from other designers' ideas or knowing what someone else is working on? I mean, how did that work then if you were in isolation?
Well, we're really much in isolation. And you know, you'd see things at the motor shows or in magazines back then. When I ran design, I like to have collaboration between the teams. I like to even have a friendly competition.
How do you do that?
Well, if you give the same assignment to a studio in Michigan, same assignment to a team in Australia, and you know, see what happens. See what how they approach the design. With the Camaro, when we brought that back, there were two teams that worked in secret locations from each other in a friendly competition. The winner got the Camaro project, and the team that did not win
suffered the ignominy of being second place?
Only for a moment, because then they got the project of designing the Chevy Volt. So, yeah.
What about these features that aren't super
functional?
Well, they're not even functional at all because they're just kind of molded in.
And the grill work on the hood, and it's just, you know, for the original Stingray racer, they may have been functional, but on this car, they're not. They just added element of speed to the car. Even back there, the vents and the sail panel, this adds speed.
But none of it's functional, right?
No,
I mean, it's really
not.
there for
it just adds to the energy in the design. They're like speed lines.
Well, you know, it's funny you call them that. I think the best part about this, and we'll get to the back, of course, at some point, but this front end is really just aggressive. And it does look shark-like.
It's aggressive. It's very shark-like, fish-like, stingray-like. It's got a lot of penetration. It was criticized for, it should have been lower for aerodynamics. It might have been better, but it just looks like it's just leaping. It's just taking off.
I mean, the whole car looks like a projectile. I mean, this feature down the hood.
I love this car. It's hard for me to talk about the car while standing here because I just want to drool. It's just, I love
Are there
it,
cars
love it,
that you
love
just
it.
want to just touch instead
I love
of drive?
the way the cut line goes into the. Well, this is one of those cars. I would just love to have a bucket of water, a rag, okay, glass of red wine,
Right.
and some great music, and just wash the car by hand. You learn so much about the car. You see things, subtle things in the design that you probably wouldn't notice unless you're washing the car by hand.
Is a car an almost tactile object that you really want to touch it and feel it? Not just from behind the wheel, but as you said, washing the car.
For me, I mean, it's like listening to music, and if you really like it, you're singing along with them.
Well, this is probably one of the most iconic American designs of all times because of something that in period was really not appreciated. What can you tell us about the center spine?
Well, I think it's a huge part of the design. Most people, when they talk about, the split window coupe, the fact that it's a bow tail, they're talking about it from the rear, looking at it directly from the rear. And it is beautiful, the way the body shape comes together, and you've got the pillar through the center of the spine. But that spine also, in profile, helps to make the car look sleek. And I can't believe that they...
How hard was
wanted
this to get
remove
approved at a company like General Motors?
Well, I can imagine it was a real challenge. There were those in marketing that didn't want to do it. I can't even imagine the meetings in which Bill Mitchell pushed to get the split window, and it only lasts for 1 year. I've driven the car, and it's not a problem for me.
Would this design have the same impact without this elevated spine?
Well, this car without the spine is a wonderful car. I think it gets to a whole nother level with the spine on it. And today, if you can imagine, today with cameras in cars and all of that, who cares? You could do that.
I mean, I think what's really amazing about this design is you have all these small, subtle touches that combine and contribute to really just an overall amazing vehicle.
What's nice about the subtle touches is that they play a support role and don't try to dominate. The tail lamps, beautiful, nice small tail lamps, very well executed. They're there in a support role, not to fight with the star, which is the roof line.
I mean, is this your favorite post-war American car?
I think so.
That you didn't design?
Or it's on a very short list. But not just because of its design, but because of its influence. Think about the 65 Chevrolet Impala, which came shortly after this. A lot of its shape, wonderful car, a lot of its shapes were inspired by this car. The whole Chevrolet lineup was inspired by this car.
How much of the
Every Corvette since this has been inspired by, including the latest.
Well, so that's the question. How much of the current C7 is part of that?
Oh, it's definitely a part of it. The shears, the intersections, the whole piercing shape. A lot of the words you use to describe this car, you use the same words to describe the C8 Corvette.
I mean, two American legends, the 1963 Chevrolet Corvette split window and Ed Welburn. Thanks so much.